You're listening to the Wealth and Wanderlust podcast, an international finance and personal development podcast for the modern day woman. I'm your host, Vanessa M.W., and I'm here to help you build a better life abroad or in America. You can find out more about my work in finance and travel on wanderonwards.co, or you can say hi on Instagram at wanderonwards. Not all classrooms have four walls, so open your mind to what's possible and let's get started. Hi, everyone. It's Vanessa M.W. back with another episode of Wealth and Wanderlust. Today, we have a very special guest. It's actually my personal mentor at my travel tech job. He's the first man to let me into the building, guys. I think I did 7 interviews for him in like 48 hours because I was so determined to work at this amazing company. And then through the years, he's taught me a lot about personal finance, about career mobility, and actually was the driving force to get me here to Munich. So please welcome my personal friend and mentor, Sam Richards. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
Vanessa, well, thank you very much for that very warm welcome, although I think you overstate my importance, but thank you very much. Yes, my name is Sam Richards, as Vanessa said. I currently work for Expedia Group as Senior Director for Global Partner Marketing. I've been with the business for the last 10 years, and before that been in a number of other roles, mostly in the digital marketing space.
Amazing. I can't believe you've been there for 10 years. I think it's just testimony to how amazing Expedia can be and how like-minded our colleagues are. I feel like everybody is quite international and open-minded. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that made me really want to join the business. It's so diverse, and even when you're based in the London office, you are surrounded by people from lots of different backgrounds, cultures, genders, mindsets. It's so diverse in all the different kind of ways that you could think about it, and that just makes for a great working environment. And also, it's a genuinely international business to be within. It has offices all over the world. So it's wonderful to have the experience to work with colleagues who aren't just based in London, but are based in Seattle, Hong Kong, Seoul, all over the world. It really is a fantastic place to be.
We're going to get a slew of comments being like, how can I apply? I'm sure. But you've had a very non-traditional career progression, and the majority of our listeners are Americans. So, we're bred at age 2 to work harder than any child has ever worked before, and that we have to have everything figured out by age 15 or risk being left behind and being homeless. So how did you start your professional career after university? And then how did you get to Expedia?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to tell you. So at university, I actually did a degree in design. Design was something I really enjoyed when I was 16, 17. So that's why I went on to do design at university. I spent 4 years doing design. And after 4 years, figured out actually I wasn't that good at it. I was a pretty mediocre designer. And I'm sure I could have gone out there and got a job doing corporate literature for somebody, but I knew in my heart there were people who were genuinely talented designers and natural designers, and it just was never something that was going to be a key strength, although it's still something I enjoy a lot. So yeah, I wasn't too sure exactly what I wanted to do, so I went, like a lot of graduates do, to one of these graduate fairs in London actually, and had a number of different conversations with a number of different companies. And I ended up chatting with one of the guys for a German supermarket chain called Lidl, or Lidl, as I think it's called more commonly in the UK, about one of their area manager roles. A trainee district manager the role was. Went through the interview process, and I was fortunate enough to get the job. It was a really interesting business to join because it was before discount retail was kind of cool and mainstream. And you literally started stacking shelves, working on the checkout, cleaning toilets in the store, learning how it works. So not particularly very glamorous at all. But shortly after I joined, my store manager who was training me actually decided he was going to leave the business. I don't think it was because I joined, but he was leaving. So I had a month to train up to be to run the store with the deputy manager. And then after a couple of months of that, an area manager left the business, and I had a couple of weeks to train to be an area manager. So I think 3-4 months into my time at Lidl, I had my district as a keen 22-year-old, and I had very little retail experience and not really any management experience either. So it was a big lesson for me in people management, in humility, and embracing not knowing things and asking lots of questions and working with people to get the best out of them. So I did retail for the best part of a couple of years. And then I decided that I wanted my weekends back. So I moved into the wonderful world of recruitment. Got offered a job in Stoke-on-Trent, very, very glamorous. It was originally going to be a job in London, but they convinced me somehow to move up to Stoke. So moved up to Stoke, did internal recruitment, headhunting for a year. And then I decided I wanted to go agency side to move back to London. And I got a job leading a recruitment team in what was called new media at the time, which is now digital media for everyone, but at the time it was called new media, when it wasn't particularly mainstream. So I worked in recruitment for the best part of 5-6 years, built the team up, had a lot of fun. It's a very interesting space to be in recruitment, because you've got new business on one side, you've got to go out and get the roles, and then you've got to go and hire all the people. And during my time there, I just got very interested in digital, because digital was booming. This was around 2005 to kind of 2009. I was really kind of in the digital space. I was talking to lots of small companies that are growing fast, new different business models. And the more time I spent in the space, the more I really loved it. I thought it was a great space to be in. Expedia was a client of mine. So I started to put some candidates in there and started to get an understanding of how good the culture was and how smart the people were that worked there. I was always impressed by the line managers and by the bar of candidates that they took in. So then, even then, I was quite excited about it. But I used my time in recruitment to really learn all I could about digital, because every day I was meeting candidates who were marketeers or biz dev people or product managers, and I'd always take it upon myself to learn what they did. Like, what is this thing, and how do you do it, and how did you learn to do that thing? So when the time came to make a change from recruitment, I decided I wanted to move into digital. But that only came after I took my career break and went out and traveled the world for 7 months, which I'll talk to in a bit. But certainly when I got back from my travels, the first call I made was to Expedia, actually, and said, hey, I've been putting candidates into the business for a while. I knew one of the people quite well there at Expedia. Would you consider me for a job? And bear in mind, I was a recruitment consultant with no direct digital experience. I went through the process with Expedia, a long interview process with Expedia, got to the last stage, and they actually said no to me, believe it or not. They said no to me because they had a very strong internal candidate. But they did say I performed well in the interviews and stay in touch. Now, a lot of people might have thought that was a bit of a fall off. But I did keep in touch with them. So I did a couple of years as sales director for an affiliate network. And then another role came up, same job again, actually, funnily enough. And I went for it, and I got offered the job. So I really wanted that business. I knew I could do the job that they'd offered, and I took it. So that was kind of me getting into the world of Expedia and my first kind of experience in terms of getting into travel digital.
Yeah. What a crazy spin of events. I don't think anyone can sit here and say my dream company took me the first time I applied. I also got rejected from Expedia, my first round of interviews. It was for EPS, which is a section of our business, tech. It was for a Scrum Master role. And the recruiter actually put me forward, and the hiring manager was like, this woman is not at all what we're looking for. and it was super awkward. But I kept at it, I kept applying, and that's how I landed on your team. And I think this story is also really important for young people to hear, because a lot of really smart, really motivated graduates have just entered the market, but with Corona, there's no jobs. And so I know that the young people are really suffering internally, because in America, at least, we're told we're so glamorous, we're so great, we pay $200,000 for a degree. We expect some return on investment with a job at the end of it. What would you say to a young person who's 22 and trying to get a job in this market right now?
Yeah, I can imagine it's very, very challenging, because you're starting from a place where you don't have the experience, and that's always difficult. And I had the same challenge, when not to the same level, of course, because we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. But I can certainly understand all of the rejections that new people get started with. And I have to say, I can remember when I was looking for jobs, me and my flatmate were both looking for jobs after graduating. I had what I called the wall of rejection, which is every time I got my rejection letter, and bear in mind, back in 2002 when I graduated, you were still getting some letters, some emails as well. I'm not that old, but I posted them on the wall. And I still have to this day my rejection letters from 2002, because I found it tremendously motivating, in a very, very odd sense, in so much as I knew I had the ability, and I knew I had the potential to do great things. And I kind of looked at those letters and just saw people who missed a potential opportunity to hire someone who perhaps didn't have all the knowledge, but I thought had a really good work ethic and really wanted to go do it. And fortunately, I found a company in Lidl at the time who hired me based on the fact that they thought I had the right attitude and the right work ethic and the willingness to learn, rather than being somebody who comes to them with 5-10 years retail management experience, which I'm sure they could easily have gone out and hired. And I think that kind of brings me to my philosophy when it comes to hiring people is, yes, in some roles that you need a certain level of competency and skill, because you just need people to do certain things. Like if you need someone who codes, then you need to hire a coder. But in other areas, and particularly on some of the softer skills, if people have got the right attitude, then you can train them on the skills. I would much rather have somebody who's got the right attitude and the right work ethic and the mentality and willingness to learn and willingness to put their hands in the air and admit that when they've made mistakes, versus somebody who looks like they're the complete picture on paper, but perhaps has lost some of their motivation, because you're more likely to have a lot more success with the former than you are with the latter candidate.
Oh, for sure. I think attitude is 90% of what it takes to make it in such a competitive industry such as tech, because every day we're getting slapped in the face, whether by our code or by someone who doesn't believe in our dreams. And it's that gusto and willingness to get back up that makes the difference in such a fast-paced industry. I'd like to think it's why you hired me, Sam. Just this like naive young lady trying to make it in London. But here we are 3 years later. Can you believe it's been that long?
I can't believe it's been that long, but yes, we were very, very happy that we did hire you. And I just think one of the points, just to kind of close out in terms of people looking for opportunities, I think it's easy when you're looking, not just at the beginning of the career, even potentially at the midpoint, to really think about the perfect fit, where you want to be, where the perfect role is, and really kind of gun for that and look at certain roles and go, I don't think the job title's there. That doesn't feel like a move forward for me. I'd encourage people to, and how I've always tried to think about it is, look at where you think your gaps are and look at what opportunities and what skills and what leaders as well, because sometimes you'll join a business because you just really want to work for the individual, because you're going to get a ton from that person's experience. Because if you think that you can get value from that opportunity, I don't think there's an issue into taking a sideways move or even a step back. I've done it a number of times where people have looked at my changes and think, hey, your job title seems more junior and this is meant to be a move forward for you. It's all about how you perceive you move forward. So, I think for people who are just starting out, it's finding an opportunity where you can learn, build out some of that experience, build out that story, so that when you're ready for the next move, you've got some experience that you can put on the table and start to move towards where you really want to be.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because you were in that trajectory and then you quit your job, went traveling, and just decided, let's start again. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and but I've done it a few times. I think when you move industries, you have to do it. So when I left Lidl, I was a district manager. I had a team. I had 5 stores that I managed in London. I had a fairly big team, and I went into recruitment. I joined it's what they call a trainee researcher, which is the bottom rung in recruitment, right? No management experience. You're kind of managing, kind of finding the candidates versus the full interview process. But I didn't really care, because I believed I could go on to do great things in that industry, but I had to learn some of the basics. So again, I didn't feel as if I had this entitlement to take my job title or my salary with me. And it's the same thing when I went into digital. When I was in recruitment, I had a team and I was a manager and all of this good stuff. But when I took my first role in Expedia, I was a senior account manager again. And I can remember talking to my dad about it, and my dad was like, "Hang on, son, you were a leader and you had a director title." And I was like, "Yeah." And it's like, "But you're a senior account manager now. Surely, surely there's something there, right?" But actually, it didn't bother me at the time, because I really knew what I wanted to get out of that, and I knew I had a lot to learn. So I thought about it in terms of long term versus short term.
Absolutely. I actually get a lot of messages from young people, I'm like 29, saying, I am worried that I'm disappointing my parents by not taking a proper job right after university, or doing something that is quote unquote beneath me. And my first reaction is, part of being an adult is making your own decisions and kind of releasing that guilt or weight you felt as a child by always being a people pleaser for your parents. It sounds like you kind of went through that. How did you get that sense of independence and like stability in your decision making?
Well, I guess I kind of started a little bit with the end in mind. I knew where I wanted to get to, which was, I was in recruitment. I'd been successful in recruitment. I'd enjoyed it. It was really good fun to work in there, and I'd been fortunate enough to work with some great people as well. And I'd learned a ton, but I just wanted to move into online. I'd seen the industry. I'd been on the outside of it, being servicing it, but not been part of that. And I started thinking to myself, well, if I want to get into that, and I see myself, or I would like to be in some kind of marketing function in the future, what are the steps I need to take from point A to point B? And the first step was, I need to get into the industry so I can learn some of this stuff, because I'm just not going to be able to go straight into this role, because I just don't have the experience. And I think when you break it down in terms of this is kind of step one of a number of steps I need to take, then it feels a lot better, right? Of course, your parents want the best for you, and if they feel as if you're doing things which might not be in your best interest, of course they're going to have some worries, right? But I think when I've been able to kind of sit down, certainly early in my career, and say to my parents, hey, this is where I want to go, this is why I'm making these decisions, they've had confidence that there's logic behind it. Of course, some risk, because there's always risk you're making these types of changes in your career. But they were always very supportive of me. They never made me feel as if I had to have a particular title, or earn X amount of money, or work for a particular company. I mean, ultimately, you're the one who's got to go to work every day. You're the one who is going to have to deal with, the outcome of the work you do. So I think, yes, everybody wants to make sure their parents feel good about things, but ultimately it's your destiny, and it's your responsibility to go make it happen, or not, for yourself.
And what about people who are
who are a little bit more mature, a little bit more senior in their positions. Let's say the age of like 25 to 35, mostly because this is, according to my analytics, my huge demographic. What sort of advice would you have for someone who does have experience but is struggling to re-enter the workforce because of the pandemic or because their industry is starting to shrink?
Quick commercial break. Want to manage your money better? Check out my beginner's budget dashboard. It's an easy-to-use digital tool that helped me economize my lifestyle easily so I could invest over $20,000 in 2020 alone. Check out the link in the description.
Yes, I mean, I think we're in circumstances which are unprecedented, and I don't think that's a misuse of that word. So it's going to be incredibly challenging for some individuals, particularly if your expertise is working in a sector or a role which is very defined. So, for example, if you have been airline cabin crew for the last 25 years, of course, it's going to be more challenging to make some of those transitions. I think what people need to do who are in those circumstances, they really need to sit down and go, okay, firstly, this has happened, and this is not something I'm able to change, and it's not their fault. Right. Ultimately, this is really a kind of a once in a generation thing that's happened, unfortunately. And really look into what they have to offer other businesses. So if you're working in something which is frontline services, you've got problem solving skills, you've got soft skills where it comes to dealing with people. How well organized are you? All of these different things, and start to think about, okay. Whilst my chosen sector might not be something which is a real option for me at the moment, just because of where the economy is, where could I potentially add value? Where would I have the opportunity to potentially start to go into an area where there is real requirements coming through, and spaces like digital is an area which is still doing reasonably well in many sectors, not all sectors, because travel continues to be challenged. But I would encourage them to do that. I would also encourage them to use their network. Your network is a very, very powerful thing. So get in touch with people. You're not, when you're talking to people, you're not begging them for a job or asking them for a handout, but just having those connections with individuals, talking to them about what they see in the industry, what they know, getting their feedback about you as an individual, what they see to be your strengths, can be very powerful. And I think putting yourself out there and having those interactions is also really good for you from a psychological perspective, because when you have that type of setback in your career, it's very easy to start to kind of become quite kind of introverted and start to lose some of that confidence. And if you start to lose some of the confidence as well, then that can just compound and make a challenging situation even more difficult. So I don't for a second think it's easy for people who have been furloughed or made redundant, particularly in certain areas. But I do think what you need to do is accept that it's happened, it's not your fault, and start to figure out how you can leverage some of the skills that you undoubtedly would have acquired in areas where potentially they are still going to be hiring, or there might be opportunities.
And this is why I always come to you, Sam, when I'm feeling down about myself, because I just feel like you give such actionable feedback. And to add on to that, to get my job at Expedia, just to get in front of Expedia, essentially, I added anyone who would accept me on LinkedIn. I messaged anyone that would let me take them to coffee. And eventually I got enough clout online on LinkedIn for the recruiters to actually start noticing me and my application and answering my DMs when I was like, do you have an update on whether or not this is an internal fill or whatnot? So use the internet, guys. People are understanding. They are willing to help. We're all trying to do our best right now. And I think we forget that people want to help us. They want to see us win. So put yourself out there. I would love to talk about this more. I think it's so relevant, but I don't want to ignore the fact that you've had such an amazing experience around the world and took that life break to go explore. You met your partner along the way. What led you, and what age did you start your 7 months abroad?
I was 29 at the time. And as I said earlier, it was when I was working in recruitment, and I got to the stage where I kind of lost my buzz for being in recruitment. It was, I'd really enjoyed it for a long period of time, and but recruitment is it's a very kind of activity-driven role, as in it's all around the number of cold calls that get made by the team, the number of roles you take on, how many candidates you put forward to how many deals you close, and it can be quite challenging as well sometimes, because you don't own an asset. You have to go out and find companies to work with who have roles, and then you have to have candidates, and then you have to have candidates who accept roles, and not only accept roles but start in jobs, and not only start in their jobs but stay in their jobs to be successful in that. And after a period of time, I was ready for a change, but I also felt I hadn't really stopped since I've been at uni, because as soon as I left uni, I went straight into work. I was chomping at the bit. I was like, okay, right, let's not waste any time. I want to get cracking now. So I decided I was just going to take some time out and do a round the world trip. And because I knew I wouldn't go back into recruitment when I came back, I literally went out and bought my round the world trip from a flight center retail shop on one of my lunch breaks, and that was it. And then that was just pre-Christmas, and then end of January, I was on a flight to my first stop, which was San Francisco. So yeah.
Did you feel like you were taking a pause from the real world almost? Like, did you have any anxiety about that, falling behind?
Not really. No, I knew I kind of felt I wanted to take a natural stopping point in where I was. I wanted to take some time to reflect and have some time out. I just really felt that it was quite a valuable thing to do, and I went traveling on my own, and I did that deliberately because I felt that if I was traveling with a friend, then there'd be that kind of comfort piece, as in and also of course when you're traveling with others, it's more of a, hey, what shall we do? Whereas when you're traveling independent, as you well know, it's right, what do I want to do today? Do I want to stay here for another week, or do I want to move on this evening? And that was great. So I did that deliberately, and I was quite relaxed about the fact that I'd saved up enough to be able to take the time out, so I didn't have any kind of financial pressure to kind of get back after 4 months or anything like that, thankfully. And I knew when I did come back, it would be a new chapter, and I'd be trying to go into something new.
Yeah, and now you have the career, you have the white picket fence, you have a beautiful family. You caught up whatever potential time you might have lost by taking a lower job or taking a pause out of work. As with me as well, I didn't get my first real job, I tell people, until I was 25. People say that I was just gallivanting around the world for 4 years. I knew I was doing stuff. I was learning about myself, figuring out what I wanted and what I wanted to be when I grew up. And you make up the time because you know how to be more effective in your life once you travel by yourself, figure out what you want, what makes you happy. How did you meet Gemma? That's his wife.
Emma, wife. Yes, Hema with a H. So I was traveling. It was quite early on actually in my trip. So the first, I kind of did a week stop in the US because I kind of had to stop on my ticket. But the first kind of main stop was in New Zealand, and I think I was there for 8 weeks in New Zealand, and I'd kind of bought one of these kind of hop on hop off bus tickets where you pay for your ticket and you can spend as long as you like in the destination, and then you just hop back on the bus when you're ready to kind of go on. I actually met her whilst I was traveling around, and we traveled together for I think about 4 or 5 of my kind of 9 weeks. So it's kind of I met her kind of a few weeks in, and we just really got along, and we really connected well, and then she was actually going over to Fiji after New Zealand, and I had planned to go to Australia, and after we kind of parted ways at the beginning, I said, hey, why don't we kind of meet up? And because I was going to go on to Southeast Asia, so I convinced her to meet me in Bangkok So we met in Bangkok, and then we spent some time in Thailand. We learned how to dive together, which was awesome. And then we went around Laos together. And then she had to fly back to Vienna because she'd kind of taken a sabbatical at work rather than left her job. So she had to get back for work. And I kind of went on to do Vietnam and Cambodia before I came back. And then when we got back, we had a year of kind of back and forth in between London and Vienna. Then I kind of managed to persuade her somehow to come and move to London. She moved to London after about a year, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love this love story. I actually threw Sam a baby shower in the office because he had his first son. Everybody thought I was just such a weird American, but that's okay. So now pivoting to your like personal life and personal finance journey, you actually got me really interested in personal finance when I was working for you, because you kept talking about ISAs and about investing and property. And I was like, what is this crazy man talking about? I had never had real money to my name. My very first job in London was at like £33,000, taxed at 30%. So I didn't have any money to do all this stuff until I got to Expedia. So what is your strategy? Are you 100% financial markets? Do you own several houses around London and you're just like an oligarch and never told me? What's your strategy?
So I think strategy might be a little bit grandiose in terms of how I define it, but I'll tell you how I've kind of thought about it. So I was quite fortunate when I was 18. A friend of mine, I was having a chat with her father, and he told me a little bit about this thing called PEP, which is basically an ISA now. They changed the name because I had a little bit of money from a business I used to run when I was in sixth form college, and I'm talking in the order of a couple of £1,000, and I wasn't really sure what I should do with it. Should I put it into a savings account? And he told me about this PEP, which essentially is what you call an ISA now, invested into stocks and shares. And that was probably the best kind of initial move that I've made, because at the time I didn't really fully understood it, but I'd actually just started index investing back in 1998. And what I did whilst I was at university is just anytime I had any additional money from any kind of part-time work I would do, I would try and add that into the index. So essentially, what I've tried to do from an investment perspective is leverage my tax-free allowance within an ISA. I'm always going into an index, into a tracker index, and that I think has been a really good foundation to get going. I think there's, people need to kind of keep in mind there's a big difference between investing and saving. Some people get those two things confused. As in, saving is putting it into a bank account and getting what is kind of sub-inflation interest at the moment, and investing is accepting that there's going to be some level of financial risk, because of course there is, but with a potential longer and bigger payoff in the future. So I've generally gone for index funds just purely because I don't have the level of expertise to really do individual stocks, and I just don't have the patience to do it either. And also, I take a long-term view on it as well. So I know that I'm not going to need that money for the next kind of 3 to 5 years, and I have that view. And I also have a view that if it goes down, because of course it does go down, it doesn't always go up. Sadly, I wish it would always go up. If it goes down, that's kind of part of it. So I have some indexes. As I've kind of got more into the technology space, I have bought some kind of non-travel tech companies where I have put some specific investments in there. But again, I've always kind of thought about those investments as kind of being kind of long-term. So I don't trade. Like a day trader is somebody who's going to trade and then they buy it today and then they wait a week and they sell it for upside. I'm not smart enough to do trading, so I've always kind of thought about it long term. And then I've also got some investment in property as well in London. So I kind of have those kind of buckets in terms of how I've thought about finance.
And do you plan on retiring early and kind of leveraging those financial levers to make that happen?
So, do I know there's this FIRE movement, I think, is it's commonly referred to in terms of people who, want to retire at 30 or want to retire at 40. For me, I enjoy working. I think the way I see my kind of finance piece is I value choice. So I want to be able to choose to do things. So if I choose in the future that I'm particularly passionate about this particular area, but that particular area isn't paying X, then I will be able to choose that I don't necessarily need to earn X to be able to do what I want to do. And I think that for me is the thing that is really exciting about really kind of thinking about your financial future, is it really empowers you and gives you that choice. A lot of people will kind of see that kind of lifestyle inflation. So as they get the next job, they get the bigger house, they get the nicer car, they get the nicer clothes. So actually they never actually have much in the way of disposable income to invest or save anywhere, because their lifestyle goes up as the salary goes up. And a piece of advice one of my early bosses gave to me, in fact, when I was little, he said to me, Sam, if you can continue to live on your trainee salary, you're going to do okay. So I always try to kind of focus and keep my expenses to when I was much earlier on in my career, and I had a trainee salary, rather than just think, hey, I got a bonus, or I got an increase, or I got a new job. Now I can spend more and have a bigger car. That for me isn't a great way to plan for the future.
Oh, that's the secret sauce, Sam. So Sam recommended that I read The King of Babylon. Was that the book?
The Richest Man in Babylon.
The Richest Man in Babylon. And the main element to take away from that book is that you should always be saving at least 10% of your take-home income. And so I've actually cranked that up. I'm investing 30 to 40% of my income per month, which allowed me to invest over $20,000 this year alone after tax money. So I'm really, really proud of that. And that wouldn't have been possible without your tutelage and book recommendations. But the secret sauce to that was not day trading. It wasn't Bitcoin. It was not spending my money. It was living on that salary that I had, the first one in London, where I had £2,000 and I could put away 200 maybe. And as my career increased, I opened my businesses, I stuck to that budget and reminded myself, you don't need fancier things to impress people you don't even know and like. You need freedom, choice, options, because I got some crazy dreams in my head, Sam, and the only way to make them happen is money. So we're working towards that goal. We're going to wrap up this segment shortly. I wanted to ask one more follow-up question, career-wise. For those of us who have been put on furlough, I say thus, I'm not on furlough, thank the universe. But for people who are on furlough and who are trying to figure out the next step, how would you recommend that they evaluate their skill set and their career to figure out what the next pivot might be?
So I think it's worth one, getting some time alone and somewhere quiet where you can really focus on it. Because actually it's although it's a very challenging time, it is worth taking the opportunity to really reflect on, okay, what is it that you actually want? Because for some people, not for all, and it's a very unfortunate circumstance if people find themselves there, but for some people, they might not have been in a job or a segment that they're particularly enjoying. So you can use it as an opportunity also to kind of re-baseline, but really think about, where is it exactly I want to be? Were you there before you were furloughed? What are the skills have you got now? As in, here's what I'm really good at. These are the things that I enjoy. And then think about what the gaps are. Because I think that's the key to career planning, is, and if you know that you want to go into product management, for example, right, which is something you know a lot about, then you need to be asking yourself the question around, okay, do I have those skills? Do I have that experience? How do I get those experience and skills And it's going to be difficult to go exactly into that job, but you can probably find opportunities that will give you the exposure to the people that you need, so you can build out some project experience to move into that in the future. So it is a very difficult time to be in, but use it as an opportunity to re-baseline yourself, to figure out what it is that you need, and also use it as an opportunity to upskill as well. If you are going to have time when you're looking for roles, it's easy just to be so focused on, I have to spend time on job boards every second of the day. But really divide that time up in terms of, I'm going to spend this time looking for roles. I'm going to spend this time reconnecting with my network. I'm going to spend this time actually upskilling myself.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Sam, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I really feel like everybody got a lot out of this interview. I wish you all the best in London, and I'm sure we'll continue to keep in contact, because I will continue to come to you for my anxieties and hopes and dreams, and I hope that's okay.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and I wish all the best financially and with their careers for all of your listeners and viewers.
Thanks so much, Sam. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
Want to win a free finance-related digital product valued anywhere from $15 to $300? Just subscribe and leave a review on iTunes with your name. I'll announce the winner each month on the podcast, and you can DM me on Instagram to claim your prize. Thanks for supporting the channel, and I'll see you next week.